Hey guys, tonight we're going to travel to a place where the air smells faintly of dry grass and wood smoke, where dust hangs lazily in the sunlight, and the horizon seems to go on forever. We're heading to West Africa in the early 14th century, to the Great Mali Empire, where a boy named Musa is about to begin a life that, let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive for more than a day. Too hot, too dry, and way too much camel hair in your food. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, as always, I'd love to know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in Niani, or at least what will one day be remembered as Niani, a trading hub tucked along the banks of the Niger River. The river moves slow here, its surface mirroring the cloudless sky. Wooden canoes slide past, piled with gourds, woven baskets, and the occasional nervous goat. The air is hot, but not yet oppressive, morning heat, the kind that promises it'll get worse. You're about 10 years old, barefoot, trailing behind an older cousin through the bustling marketplace. Traders call out prices in a dozen languages, Bambara, Sonic, Arabic, all overlapping into a strange kind of music. You pass a table stacked with salt slabs from the north, white and gritty, worth almost as much as gold. Someone is roasting millet cakes over a clay hearth, and the nutty smell makes your stomach growl. Musa's family isn't poor. His father, Fagale, has influence, enough that people greet him with cautious respect. But in a place where power can shift like sand dunes in a strong wind, that doesn't mean certainty. Historians still argue whether Musa was born into direct royal blood or more of a cadet branch, close enough to matter, but not enough to guarantee a throne. You spend much of your boyhood listening. Not because you're shy, though you are a little, but because it's safer to hear first and speak later. You pick up stories from merchants who've crossed the Sahara, tales of cities made of stone in far-off North Africa, of scholars with books thicker than a saddle blanket, of deserts so dry you could die before the water in your goatskin bag got warm. One afternoon, you help your mother grind grain in a large wooden mortar. The rhythmic thump of the pestle, the rasp of her voice telling you to keep your elbows in, the warm smell of ground millet, it's the soundtrack of your home. A neighbor stops by to share gossip. Someone in the royal family is sick, maybe dying. You pretend not to listen, but your hand's slow on the pestle. The town changes as you grow. Walls are repaired, new houses go up, a larger market square is built. Caravans bring copper from Takeda, ivory from the forests, even a few fragile glass beads from far across the sea. At night, the adults gather around low fires, their voices dropping to near whispers when they speak of the Mansa, the king. He is powerful, yes, but the desert is unpredictable, and power here always depends on keeping trade flowing and alliances steady. You notice the way visiting scholars from the north dress differently, flowing robes of pale blue, faces wrapped against the sun. You're fascinated by their ink-stained fingers and their habit of scribbling notes in little folded books. One smiles at you once and presses a date into your palm before moving on. You eat it slowly, letting the sweetness coat your tongue. A small but telling thing about your boyhood, you're already comfortable around wealth. Gold is not this exotic, mythical thing, it's a tool, like a well-balanced spear or a sturdy donkey. Your family has a little of it, enough to trade for fine cloth now and then. You learn early that salt is just as precious, though. In a land where you sweat more than you think you possibly could, salt is life. By your mid-teens, you're tall, with the wiry strength of someone used to long walks under a hard sun. You've learned to read the moods of the elders in the market, to judge when to speak, and when to melt quietly into the background. You've heard rumors of distant conflicts, but they're as vague as clouds on the horizon. What matters is here, the steady flow of the Niger, the hum of trade, the slow rhythm of daily life. There's one memory you carry, a caravan arriving just after sunset. The air is cooler, but dust still hangs in the air from hundreds of hooves and feet. Torches flare, throwing light on tall, long-necked camels, their eyes half-lidded with exhaustion. The traders wear exhaustion too, but their saddlebags bulge. Children dart forward to see what wonders might spill out, spices that smell like faraway gardens, bolts of cloth that shine even in firelight, and, of course, gold. You think, one day, I will see where this gold comes from. And yet, even then, you can't quite imagine how much of it will pass through your hands. That will come later, after power changes hands, after journeys you can't yet picture, after a crown finds its way onto your head. For now, you are simply Musa, a boy who knows the weight of a water jar on his shoulder, the heat of the sun on his neck, and the quiet thrill of imagining something bigger. You're older now, no longer the boy trailing behind your cousin in the market, but a young man who moves with a little more purpose. Your shoulders have broadened, and your hands carry the faint calluses of someone who's learned that work is never optional, even in a family of standing. The Niger still flows past Niani, as unhurried as ever, but your life is picking up a strange kind of speed. News has been traveling through the market. The Mansa Abubakar II is planning something extraordinary. Historians still argue whether he was Musa's direct uncle or just a distant cousin in a complicated royal family tree, but either way, the man has a habit of thinking big. Rumor says he's fascinated by the ocean to the west. Not just fascinated, obsessed. And not in the I'll take a nice boat ride and be home for dinner way. No, this is the I'll send out entire fleets to see what's over the horizon kind of obsession. You hear the details and fragments. A first expedition vanishes into the Atlantic, and Abubakar decides the problem was that there weren't enough ships. So naturally, he builds more. Hundreds, in fact. You picture them lined up along the riverbank, their hulls smelling of fresh-cut timber, sails furled and waiting. And then, one day, you hear the truth, Abubakar's going with them. He leaves you, Musa, as deputy ruler in his absence. It's meant to be temporary, of course. Just a caretaker role while the Mansa chases saltwater dreams. You nod, bow, and try to act like the weight of the entire Mali Empire hasn't just been set on your shoulders. Inside, you're thinking about the grain supplies, the trade routes, the restless nobles who might take advantage of a temporary leader's temporariness. You're also thinking about how many people will be really upset if this whole ocean thing goes wrong. The day Abubakar departs, the entire city seems to hum. Traders, warriors, curious onlookers, they all press toward the riverbank. You stand slightly apart, watching the royal fleet set out. Oars dip and rise, sails catch the morning breeze, and the ships shrink slowly against the horizon until they're nothing but a faint line. And then they're gone. Days pass. Then weeks. Then months. The Mansa doesn't return. Historians still debate exactly how much time passed. Some say only a few months, others claim over a year. But what's clear is that at some point, it becomes obvious, you are not acting ruler anymore. You are ruler. The crown is ceremonial, yes, but when it's placed on your head for the first time, you feel its real weight. It's not just gold, it's the constant awareness that every decision you make ripples outward to affect thousands of people you will never meet. It's deciding which roads get repaired first, which tax disputes matter enough to hear in person, which neighboring chief's friendly gift is actually a political trap. You start to understand that the Mali Empire isn't just a land of gold and river towns. It's a living thing, stretching from the forests in the south to the sands of the Sahara in the north. It breathes through the caravans and markets, through the scholars in Timbuktu, through the fishermen pulling in nets at dawn. You have to keep that breathing steady. One morning, you ride out with a small group of guards to inspect a section of road leading toward the copper mines. The air is crisp from a night's rain, and the red earth smells rich. Along the way, a village elder greets you with a gourd of sweetened milk. You drink slowly, the cool liquid coating your tongue, and think how easily such a simple act, a shared drink, can keep loyalty strong. You also learn that ruling means endless listening. Everyone wants something, a tax reduced, a boundary shifted, a son given a post in the army. Some requests are as small as changing a market day to avoid conflict with a neighboring town, others are as big as resolving disputes that could spark open fighting. You keep your voice calm, your answers measured, even when the person in front of you smells like they've been riding a camel for 2 days without stopping. And of course, there's the gold. You've always known Mali's wealth was impressive, but now you see the scale, gold from Bambuk and Beret, traded for salt, cloth, and everything in between. Gold dust carefully weighed in little leather pouches. Gold nuggets passed from palm to palm like smooth stones. Sometimes it feels like half the empire's work is just moving gold around so that other things, like food, can keep moving too. But there's another side to all of this. You're aware that some neighbors, jealous kingdoms, ambitious warlords see a young ruler as an opportunity. Mali is strong, but you keep an ear out for murmurs of trouble. For now, the murmurs stay distant, like thunder too far off to ruin a picnic. At night, when the palace courtyard is quiet and the lamps burn low, you think of Abu Bakr somewhere beyond the ocean, staring at a different horizon. You wonder if he found what he was looking for, or if the sea simply swallowed his ships without a trace. You wonder, too, if you'll ever have the luxury of chasing a mystery like that. For now, there's no time. You're Musa. And while it's not the life you expected, it's the life you have. You wake to the sound of metal striking stone, a rhythmic, ringing note that carries through the morning air. At first, you think it's the blacksmith in the palace courtyard shaping a blade, but when you step outside, you realize the sound is coming from farther off, toward the hills. The gold mines. It's not that you've never thought about them before, gold is everywhere in your world, after all, but now, as Musa, you understand that these mines are more than a curiosity. They are the heartbeat of the empire. Without their steady pulse, the trade caravans slow, the markets thin, and the coffers that fund armies, scholars, and roads start to feel strangely light. You ride out to see one for yourself. The path winds through low hills, dotted with thorny bushes and occasional bursts of bright flowers. The air smells faintly metallic, like a coin held too long in your hand. When you reach the mine, you find men and women working in the slanting morning light, hauling baskets of earth from narrow pits. Their voices rise in work songs, low and steady, a beat to match the lifting and emptying of their loads. You watch as the earth is sifted in shallow wooden pans, the fine dust shaken away until something heavier, something yellow, glints in the sunlight. Gold dust, the size of breadcrumbs. In other pans, small nuggets roll to the bottom with a satisfying clink. You realize that, in a day, this group will collect enough gold to trade for bolts of fine cloth from Egypt, jars of spices from the Maghreb, or even a horse strong enough to carry a rider from one end of the empire to the other. Historians still argue about the exact output of Mali's gold mines in your time. Some say it was as much as 2/3 of the known world's supply. Others think that's an exaggeration spread by travelers who'd never seen so much wealth in one place. But as you watch a miner tip an entire pouch of gold dust into a leather bag, you start to suspect the truth might not be far off. There's a quirky detail here that amuses you. While gold is valuable, it's not the rarest commodity in the empire. That honor goes to salt. The thought makes you smile. Imagine some merchant arriving from Europe, expecting to be dazzled by gold, only to see people treating it as common as grain, while salt is carried like a sacred offering. You step into the shade of a nearby acacia tree, sipping water from a leather flask. A foreman approaches, bowing slightly, and updates you on the mine's output. You nod, making mental notes. The wealth here doesn't just appear in palace treasuries, it's carefully accounted for, divided into shares for the crown, for the miners, for the upkeep of roads and caravans. Leaving the mine, you travel back along the Niger, where traders are loading canoes with goods for the journey north. The water sparkles in the late afternoon sun, and you catch sight of a fisherman balancing expertly in his narrow boat, tossing a woven net in a wide arc. You wonder if he knows that the gold moving through these waters will eventually shape not just Mali's fate, but how far your own name will travel. At court, the gold is everywhere, but not in piles or gaudy displays. It's in the fine embroidery on a robe gifted by a visiting chief. It's in the delicate inlay on a ceremonial sword. It's in the small nuggets that ambassadors from far-off lands slip into your hand as tokens of friendship or subtle bribes. One evening, you walk through the palace storerooms with your chief treasurer, who carries a wax tablet covered in neatly scratched symbols. He explains how caravans bound for Cairo, Tunis, and beyond will carry gold in carefully weighed pouches, sealed with a lump of red clay stamped with the royal mark. The system works, most of the time. Occasionally, a pouch goes missing, and a quiet investigation follows. You've learned that the quieter, the better. Sometimes the truth is simply that the pouch fell into a river and is now somewhere at the bottom, glinting among the pebbles. There's a certain irony in knowing that you sit atop unimaginable wealth and yet rarely touch it directly. It flows through your hands like water through fingers, there for a moment, then moving on to shape something else, a road, a mosque, a feast for foreign dignitaries. And as you lie awake at night, listening to the faint hum of the city beyond the palace walls, you start thinking of what that wealth could do beyond Mali's borders. You've heard of the holy city of Mecca, of Cairo's markets overflowing with goods from every corner of the known world, of scholars whose books could fill an entire room with knowledge you've never even imagined. The thought takes root. You can almost feel it growing. The idea that began as a quiet seed in your mind is starting to sprout. You can feel it each time you step outside the palace and look toward the horizon, the sense that the Mali Empire could be more than it already is, that its borders could stretch a little farther, its markets hum a little louder. It's not that Mali is weak. Far from it. The empire is already one of the most prosperous on earth, stitched together by rivers, trade routes, and a shared respect for the authority of the Mansa. But you know that prosperity is a restless thing. If you don't keep it moving, it begins to dry up. And so, you start thinking about expansion, not in the swaggering, sword-waving way some rulers do, but with the same patience you'd use to coax a stubborn camel into walking. You ride out with your generals, passing through stretches of tall, swaying grasses. The air is heavy with the smell of earth after a light rain, and the path is soft beneath your horse's hooves. You travel to the edges of the empire, where the allegiance of certain chiefs is more a polite suggestion than a firm commitment. You listen more than you speak, your words measured, your gaze steady. Some of these chiefs are quick to pledge loyalty. A gift of salt here, a silk robe there, and suddenly the Mali banners are flying over their settlements. Others are less eager. One tells you that his people have lived without foreign rulers for generations, and he's not eager to change that. You smile, offer him a finely worked dagger, and suggest, gently, that the protection of the Mali Empire is worth more than any dagger. Historians still argue whether this was the moment that Chief decided to accept your rule or whether his elders convinced him later. There are also moments of almost accidental diplomacy. In one town, a minor dispute over fishing rights threatens to escalate into open hostility. You arrive, listen to both sides, and propose a simple rotation system, certain days for one group, certain days for the other. It's not exactly revolutionary, but the relief in their faces tells you it was the right move. Trade is your quiet ally in this expansion. A caravan arriving with salt, copper, and cloth often speaks louder than any army. You encourage the building of new market squares, the smoothing of roads, the construction of small river ports where goods can be loaded and unloaded quickly. Merchants quickly see the benefit of operating under Mali's stability, and once their profits grow, so does their loyalty. You also rely on a kind of traveling rumor, a carefully managed whisper campaign. Messengers carry tales of Mali's fairness, its prosperity, and, yes, the Mansa's generosity. They also mention, in passing, the size of your army. It's all about balance. People should want to join, but also know what might happen if they choose not to. One afternoon, you stop in a newly acquired town and walk through its narrow streets. The air is thick with the smell of cooking, spiced stews bubbling in clay pots, flatbreads baking on hot stones. Children run past you, kicking a bundle of rags that serves as a ball. An elder offers you a carved wooden stool, and you sit while he pours you a drink made from fermented millet. It's slightly sour, with a grassy aftertaste, but you drink it without flinching. There's a quirky bit of local history he shares, that the town's founder once kept a pet hyena that supposedly guarded his granary. You picture it, the spotted animal pacing back and forth in front of a mud brick storehouse, and you can't help but smile. You tell him you'll have to see if a hyena can be persuaded to guard your treasury. Slowly, the empire grows. The maps in your council chamber are updated, the painted lines stretching farther in all directions. More tributary towns mean more resources, and more resources mean you can think even bigger. At night, standing on the palace balcony, you look out over Niani's lights flickering in the darkness. The air is warm, carrying the distant sounds of music and conversation. You know that expansion is never a permanent victory. It's something you have to tend, like a field that can grow wild if left alone. But for now, Mali is stronger, larger, and more interconnected than it was when you first wore the crown. And somewhere in the back of your mind, the thought returns, if this is what you can achieve here, what could you do if you traveled far beyond? The palace is never truly silent. Even at night, there's always the faint clink of a guard's spear but against stone, the soft murmur of servants exchanging words in the courtyard, or the distant laugh from someone who thinks the Mansa has gone to bed. But in the early mornings, before the sun burns the mist off the river, the palace feels slower, almost like it's holding its breath. This is when you like to walk through the inner courtyards, past the pools of still water reflecting the carved wooden beams above. The air smells faintly of jasmine from the small garden, and you can hear the flutter of pigeons roosting in the roof beams. It's a calm moment before the business of ruling begins, and it's where you sometimes find your advisors already deep in quiet conversation. Your court is a living thing, full of personalities that sometimes blend harmoniously, sometimes clash like cymbals. There's your chief treasurer, meticulous to the point where he once had a grain count double-checked because the numbers looked slightly smug. There's the commander of your army, who speaks sparingly but has a way of staring just long enough to make anyone reconsider their argument. There's also the head of palace etiquette, who seems to believe that the correct angle of a bow is a matter of national security. Historians still argue over how large your court was. Some say a few dozen court figures, others insist it must have been hundreds, given the scale of the empire. What's certain is that these advisors are the threads keeping the royal fabric from fraying. Court life has its rituals. You hold audiences where merchants present rare goods, a bolt of cloth from China, its weave so fine you can hardly see the threads, a carved ivory tusk polished to a soft gleam, a jar of honey that smells faintly of wildflowers. You accept these with a gracious nod, sometimes offering a gift in return. It's all part of the dance. Gifts are less about objects and more about signaling respect, loyalty, and mutual benefit. There's also the constant flow of messages from across the empire. They arrive on horseback, by river canoe, and sometimes, much later than they should have, on foot. These scrolls and letters carry everything from detailed trade reports to small-town gossip, which you read with equal care. You never know when a line about two herders arguing over a cow might actually hint at a deeper conflict. One day, during a particularly warm afternoon session, you lean back on your carved chair while two of your advisors debate whether a new market road should go east toward a growing copper trade or west toward a cluster of salt mines. You listen, sipping a spiced drink that cools your tongue with hints of mint and cardamom. Both have strong arguments. You let them talk until their voices start to fray, then suggest a compromise, a forked road serving both. It's more expensive, but the silence that follows tells you it's the right call. Court life also comes with its lighter moments. During one banquet, a musician attempting to impress you loses his grip on a lute string, which snaps and ricochets into the bowl of a startled nobleman. The entire table freezes for half a second before laughter rolls through the hall like a warm breeze. You can't help it, you laugh too, the kind of laugh that leaves you wiping tears from your eyes. Sometimes, though, the humor is quieter. You've developed the habit of walking the palace kitchens late at night, when the cooks are cleaning up. You ask questions about their spices, their methods, the origin of certain recipes. One older cook tells you about a stew he learned from his grandmother, who claimed it could cure a bad temper faster than an apology. You request it the next day after a particularly tedious meeting. The court is also where you test ideas, delicate ones you wouldn't announce to the whole empire. You mention, in passing, the thought of making a pilgrimage to Mecca, and you watch as your advisors exchange subtle glances. Some are clearly in favor, seeing the political and spiritual benefits. Others worry about the risks of leaving the empire, even for a short while. You don't press the point, not yet. And so, the days pass in this blend of ceremony, council, and quiet maneuvering. The palace hums with voices, the courtyards bloom and fade with the seasons, and the empire's pulse keeps time with the steady work of those gathered around you. Every now and then, you catch yourself thinking how far you've come from the boy wandering the market in Yanni. But then someone walks in holding a ledger or a diplomatic letter, and you're reminded there's no time for nostalgia when you're holding an entire empire together. You find yourself spending more evenings in the palace's small prayer hall. It's not the grandest space in the Yanni, but that's part of the appeal. The walls are simple, plastered in warm earth tones, and the air smells faintly of wood smoke and the woven grass mats that line the floor. Here, you can kneel without a courtier watching for your reaction, or a scribe scratching down every word you speak. Your faith has always been a quiet companion, something woven into daily life like the call to prayer drifting over the rooftops. But as the years pass, you feel it pulling at you more strongly. You think about the long chain of travelers and merchants who have passed through Mali on their way to the holy cities, pilgrims who set out across deserts and seas not for gold or trade, but for something beyond measure. Historians still argue whether your decision to make the pilgrimage to Mecca was born purely of devotion or if it was also a calculated move to display Mali's wealth and prestige to the Islamic world. In truth, you know it's both. You believe deeply, but you also understand the quiet power of being seen. One afternoon, after court has ended and the sun is beginning its slow drop toward the horizon, you speak with a trusted imam. His beard is white, his voice calm as still water. You tell him of your desire to make the Hajj, and he nods slowly, as though he's known this moment was coming for years. He reminds you of the obligations of the journey, purity of intention, patience, generosity. You assure him you are ready, even though you know no one can truly be ready for a journey of thousands of miles. Still, the logistics begin to form in your mind. You'll need to move with a caravan large enough to ensure safety, but not so large that it becomes an unwieldy burden. You'll need supplies, water, food, tents, spare animals. And of course, you'll bring gold, not in the form of ostentatious piles, but enough to give freely along the way. A quirky thought strikes you. If the journey is successful, people far from Mali may hear your name before they ever see your face. In Cairo, in Mecca, perhaps even in cities you've only heard of in travelers' tales, someone might speak of the Musa who traveled with a caravan of such generosity that markets shifted in his wake. As you plan, you begin to notice how many small things are tied to faith. The architecture of the mosques you've commissioned, the scholars you've welcomed to your court, the laws shaped by Islamic principles. You've always seen them as part of the natural order, but now you think about how they connect Mali to the wider Muslim world, a network of prayer and tradition stretching from your palace all the way to distant, bustling ports on the Arabian Peninsula. One evening, after a long day of discussion with your council, you wander into the garden. The moon is nearly full, its light silvering the leaves of the mango trees. You remember a story told by a merchant from the east that every pilgrim who reaches Mecca carries a light in their heart, and when they return home, that light spills into their community. You wonder what kind of light you might bring back. Your decision isn't yet public, but the ripple is already moving through the court. Servants whisper about the journey, traders speculate on the routes you'll take, and your generals quietly begin thinking about which men to send for protection. The pilgrimage is no small matter. It will take months, even years, to complete. And yet, the idea feels less like a burden and more like an open door you've been meaning to walk through. You know that once you step out of Mali's borders on this journey, nothing will be quite the same when you return. And in some quiet part of you, that's exactly the point. The quiet decision in your heart has turned into a thundering reality. The caravan is gathering. From the palace walls, you can already see the early signs, lines of camels being led into Niani, their long lashes flicking lazily as if they're unimpressed by the historical moment they're about to be part of. Porters carry bundles wrapped in leather, merchants haggle over bolts of cloth, and somewhere in the distance, a drummer keeps a slow, steady rhythm that seems to anchor the chaos. You've decided the journey will not be modest. This will be a pilgrimage worthy of the Mali Empire's wealth and the Munsa's position. It's not arrogance, it's presentation. Historians still argue whether your caravan numbered in the hundreds or thousands, but what's certain is that it would be large enough to make an impression in every city you pass through. Gold will be part of the spectacle, of course. You've ordered that pouches of gold dust be prepared, each weighed carefully and sealed with the royal mark. These will be given freely as gifts, to scholars, to rulers, to the poor. The generosity will speak for Mali's prosperity more loudly than any speech could. The preparations have a strange rhythm. In the mornings, the palace courtyard smells of fresh leather as saddlebags are stitched and repaired. The tailors work quickly, their needles flashing in the sun, while a group of women sit nearby braiding thick ropes to secure loads. In the afternoons, the courtyard fills with animals, donkeys braying, camels shifting their weight, horses tossing their manes. There's a quirky problem you hadn't anticipated: camel personality. Some are calm and patient, others seem to take offense at everything, from the color of a blanket to the way the wind blows. One particularly stubborn camel refuses to kneel for loading unless offered a handful of dates first. You privately admire its negotiation skills. You also have to decide who will travel with you. Trusted generals for protection, scholars for spiritual counsel, scribes to record the journey, merchants to manage the flow of supplies. Each person is chosen not just for their role, but for their ability to endure months of travel without unraveling into impatience or quarrels. At night, as the drums slow to a low, almost hypnotic beat, you walk among the tents that have sprung up outside the palace. Families of porters cook simple meals over small fires, rice steamed with onions, flatbreads browned on griddles, stews simmering with okra and dried fish. The smells mingle with the dusty scent of camel hair and the faint tang of metal from newly forged tools. A messenger arrives from a town 2 days' ride away, offering to send fresh horses to meet the caravan on the road. You accept, knowing that animals will tire quickly under such a load. Another message arrives from a merchant in Cairo, promising to arrange lodging for you there. Already, the journey feels like it has begun, even though your feet have not yet left Niani soil. There's one evening you'll remember in particular. The sun has set, the sky a deep indigo scattered with stars. You're sitting on a low stool while a scribe reads aloud the list of supplies: sacks of rice, jars of honey, bolts of cotton, amphorae of water, drums of salt, casts of dates. As he reads, you can almost see the caravan stretched out along the horizon, each step carrying you farther from home and deeper into history. The decision to leave is no longer theoretical. The caravan is alive now, breathing, shifting, preparing to carry your intention across deserts and kingdoms. And with each passing day, the pull toward the road grows stronger, until you can hardly tell whether you're leading the journey or the journey is leading you. The morning you finally leave Niani, the air feels different, cooler than usual, as if the sun itself is holding back to watch you go. You mount your horse slowly, the leather saddle warm from where it's been waiting, and glance at the line of camels stretching into the distance. The caravan has become a living river, hundreds of animals and people, supplies packed in neat bundles, the occasional glint of gold dust in the morning light. As the gates open, the sound rises, a low, rolling murmur of hooves, footsteps, and voices. Drums beat in a steady pattern to set the pace, and the caravan begins its slow crawl toward the horizon. The first days are deceptively gentle. The land near the Niger is still green, dotted with baobab trees whose wide trunks seem older than memory itself. Villages greet you with music, children waving palm leaves, elders offering bowls of cool water. You stop briefly in each place, leaving small gifts, handfuls of gold dust, bolts of cloth, a few goats for the community. It's both a gesture of faith and a quiet strategy. Word of your generosity will travel ahead of you, smoothing the way. But soon, the green begins to fade. The trees grow sparse, the air drier. By the time you reach the edges of the Sahara, the earth has shifted from red to a pale yellow that reflects the sun in an almost blinding glare. Historians still argue over your exact route, whether you crossed through Tagaza, famous for its salt mines, or skirted along other established trade paths. What's certain is that the desert is both enemy and ally. The heat presses on you like a heavy cloak, but the open horizon means danger can be seen long before it arrives. The camels move in their peculiar, swaying rhythm. You've grown used to their groans and snorts, their occasional habit of turning their heads to stare at you with what feels like judgment. You spend hours watching their padded feet press into the sand, only for the wind to erase each step moments later. There's a quirky trick you learned from an old caravan guide. Never drink your water all at once, no matter how thirsty you feel. Instead, you hold a small sip in your mouth, letting it slowly seep down your throat. He says it tricks your body into thinking it's had more. You're not sure if it's science or superstition, but in the desert, you follow advice like it's law. Nights in the Sahara are a surprise. After the punishing heat of the day, the cold settles in with a sharpness that bites at your fingers. Fires are lit in shallow pits, and you wrap yourself in layers of cloth while listening to the low hum of conversation. Sometimes, a guide will point to the stars, naming constellations you've never heard before, patterns they've used to navigate long before compasses ever reached this land. One evening, as you share a simple meal of dried meat and dates, a merchant from the north tells you of a city where the streets are paved in marble, and the markets sell glass so clear it looks like water frozen in your hand. You tuck the image away, wondering if it's true or just another traveler's flourish. The journey is slow, but each day brings you closer to the great northern cities. In the distance, you sometimes spot the shimmer of a mirage, pools of water that vanish when you approach. They're a reminder that the desert rewards patience but punishes haste. And yet, despite the exhaustion, there's a strange peace in the rhythm of it all, the steady plod of camels, the whisper of sand underfoot, the knowledge that you are crossing one of the harshest landscapes in the world not as a desperate wanderer, but as a ruler carrying your purpose forward. By the time the first hints of civilization appear, a cluster of mud brick buildings, the distant smell of cooking fires, you feel as though you've been traveling for far longer than the calendar says. But the city ahead is Cairo, and it's about to change everything. Cairo rises before you like a mirage that refuses to vanish. From the moment you see the first cluster of minarets piercing the pale sky, you know this city is not merely a stop, it's a stage. The Nile curves lazily beside it, glinting in the sun, as though it has been rehearsing for centuries to greet travelers just like you. Entering the city is like stepping into a world made entirely of sound and scent. The streets hum with life, the calls of merchants selling everything from dates to perfumes, the clatter of donkey-hooves on stone, the distant, haunting echo of the muezzin's call to prayer. You breathe in a cloud of spice and dust, with faint undertones of grilled lamb drifting from somewhere unseen. Your arrival is no secret. Word of your caravan, its size, its wealth, the gold you give away so freely, has traveled faster than your camels could. Crowds gather to watch, curious eyes following the procession. A few children dart alongside, daring each other to run close enough to touch your horse before scurrying back. Historians still argue about the exact amount of gold you spent in Cairo. Some claim it was so much that it destabilized the local economy for years, lowering the value of gold itself. Whether the numbers are exaggerated or not, there's no doubt your generosity leaves a lasting impression. You hand out coins to beggars in the street, donate to scholars and mosques, and commission works that blend your empire's style with the artistry of Cairo's craftsmen. One afternoon, you meet with the Sultan. The palace is a wonder of carved stone and inlaid wood, sunlight filtering through latticed windows to paint intricate shadows across the floor. The Sultan greets you warmly, though there's a flicker in his eyes that suggests he is measuring you, your power, your influence, your intent. You speak of the pilgrimage, of Mali's prosperity, of the bonds that might grow between your peoples. There's a quirky scene one evening when you try local street food, skewers of spiced meat grilled over open flames. The vendor, unaware of who you are, offers you extra pieces because you look like you've traveled far. You thank him, and for a brief moment, you're simply another hungry traveler on Cairo's busy streets. Your caravan rests in the city for several days. During that time, you send messengers to arrange the next leg of the journey toward Mecca, gather fresh supplies, and replace worn gear. The camels seem to enjoy their rest too, lounging in the shade of courtyard walls, occasionally snatching at fig leaves from overhanging branches. But Cairo is more than just a place to pause. It's a crossroads where ideas meet, where scholars debate the movement of the stars, where merchants tell tales of cities across oceans, where poets weave words that feel like music. You attend a gathering where an astronomer unfurls a map of the heavens, tracing lines with a finger as he explains the movements of planets. You don't fully follow the mathematics, but you understand the awe. By the time you leave, Cairo has woven itself into your memory. The scent of its markets, the call of prayer at dawn, the gleam of the Nile under the moon, all of it lingers. But the pilgrimage is not yet complete. The road to Mecca lies ahead, and with it, the reason you began this journey in the first place. The road from Cairo to Mecca is both familiar in rhythm and strange in its promise. You've already crossed deserts and rivers, but now each step feels threaded with a quiet anticipation, as though the earth itself knows where you're going. You leave Cairo early in the morning, the city's minarets still silhouetted against the pale dawn. The Nile fades behind you, replaced by the rolling, arid expanse of the Red Sea's coastal lands. The sun is sharp but not yet oppressive, and the caravan moves at an easy pace. Your camels sway like ships on a steady sea. The route bends along ancient trade paths, the same ones countless merchants, pilgrims, and adventurers have taken before. Historians still argue over which specific road you chose. Some say you followed the Gulf of Suez closely, others believe you traveled further inland to avoid unpredictable coastal winds. Whichever path it was, the journey is dotted with small settlements where date palms rise like green exclamation marks against the desert's pale canvas. Your supplies are carefully rationed now. The lessons of the Sahara stay with you. Water is measured, food is portioned, and shade is treated like treasure. Still, moments of warmth punctuate the journey. A guide teaching you how to fold your headscarf so it won't blow loose in the wind. A cook who insists on making you a sweet cake from dates and honey so you remember Egypt's kindness. At night, the stars return in their full brilliance, unspoiled by city light. You often find yourself lying awake, the soft crunch of sand under your blanket, staring at constellations that look the same from Mali as they do here. One of your companions points out a bright star near the horizon and swears it's a sign you'll reach Mecca without trouble. You don't believe in omens, but you let the thought soothe you. Approaching Mecca, the air shifts. There is a hum to the land, a subtle sense that it has been walked upon by millions with the same purpose. The hills rise and fall gently, the paths crowded now with other pilgrims. You pass men from Persia, women from Anatolia, families from the Horn of Africa, all moving toward a single point. Their clothes and languages differ, but the rhythm of their steps is the same. When the Kaaba finally comes into view, it's not the grandeur that strikes you first, it's the stillness it commands. Even amid the bustle, there's a gravity to the place, as if time folds in on itself here. You dismount, feeling the weight of the journey settle into your bones. The rituals begin slowly, each step deliberate. You join the thousands circling the Kaaba, your own pace steady, your mind emptied of everything except the motion itself. Historians still debate whether you performed every act of the Hajj personally or delegated some due to your royal status, but in this moment, it feels unthinkable not to walk the path yourself. The city hums with pilgrims at every corner. Markets overflow with goods, fragrant incense, hand-woven fabrics, beads carved from smooth stone. The call to prayer rolls across rooftops like a tide, drawing people together in unison. One afternoon, you find yourself speaking with a scholar from distant Samarkand. His beard is white as salt, and his eyes crinkle with mirth as he tells you that the journey changes everyone who makes it, though not always in the way they expect. You think about this long after he's gone, wondering what change will take root in you when you finally return home. For now, you rest in Mecca's warm embrace, letting the noise, the prayer, and the mingling of the world's people settle over you like a woven cloak. The road home can wait. Leaving Mecca is like walking away from the center of a compass. Every step feels as though it's pulling you outward into a wider circle. You fulfilled the purpose that brought you across deserts, rivers, and kingdoms, yet now another mission takes shape in your mind, to return to Mali, not just as a ruler, but as a ruler transformed. The caravan is leaner now, some pilgrims remaining in Mecca for extended prayers, others heading toward different homelands. Still, your party is far from small. Your gifts, your retinue, your guards, your scribes, these travel with you, an unmistakable moving statement of Mali's wealth. You begin retracing your path toward Cairo, though the journey feels different in reverse. The desert, somehow, is less daunting. You've already seen its face in full glare. Now you notice smaller details, a lone acacia tree stubbornly thriving in dry soil, the faint sound of wind whistling through rock hollows, the way shadows lengthen so quickly in the late afternoon. Historians still argue whether you made a direct return to Mali or lingered to visit other Islamic centers of learning. One school of thought says you traveled to Medina before heading north, gathering more religious texts and speaking with scholars. Another insists you took a coastal route along the Red Sea, drawn by the trade ports there. Whatever the truth, the journey back is just as full of encounters. In Cairo again, the welcome is warm but tinged with amazement. Your spending on the way to Mecca is still the talk of the city. Merchants remember you, and some even try to return small gifts you gave them, claiming they were too generous to accept. You politely refuse. A quirky episode unfolds when one of your camels develops a strange fascination with a spice merchant's stall. The animal leans in to sniff sacks of cinnamon, turmeric, and cloves, sending the merchant into mild panic. You end up buying a small sack of cloves just to smooth things over. Back in your tent one evening, you sort through the goods collected along the way, scrolls of poetry in Arabic script, rare cloth dyed deep indigo, intricate metalwork that catches the candlelight. Each is a fragment of a wider world, and you imagine them in Timbuktu's markets and libraries. The road from Cairo to the western reaches is long, but the caravan moves with practiced discipline now. The men know the order of packing, the camels know the pace, and you know which stretches of desert require silence and which welcome song. Some nights, your griots sing quietly, telling stories of Mali's founding kings, their voices mingling with the low moan of the wind outside your tent. By the time you leave Egypt behind, the thought of home grows sharper. The Niger River's bend, the familiar rhythm of your court, the taste of millet bread fresh from the fire, all of it tugs at you. But you also carry something you didn't before, the experience of being one traveler among thousands, all chasing the same horizon. You travel westward under a sun that seems to grow more familiar the closer you get to your own lands. The dunes, the rocky plateaus, even the heat feel like parts of a story you've always known but are now reading again with new eyes. Crossing back into the territories near Mali feels like the end of a long exhale. The land changes first in small hints, the soil deepens in color, the vegetation thickens, the air grows heavier with the scent of grass after a rare rain. You begin to see familiar birds, their calls carrying on the wind like fragments of home. The caravan has been reduced again, trimmed to its most loyal core. Many pilgrims parted ways after Cairo, and what remains now is a tightly knit band, hardened by months of shared travel. You know their voices in the dark, the sound of their footsteps, even the way they laugh when a joke is told in the quiet hours before sleep. Historians still argue whether your re-entry into Mali was a grand, orchestrated parade or a more gradual, understated arrival. Some chronicles describe villages preparing for weeks, decorating pathways, gathering musicians, and lining the roads to greet you with drums and praise. Others suggest you slip back into your realm quietly, letting your return be felt first in whispers rather than in spectacle. Either way, the journey west is punctuated with reunions. Traders from your own empire meet you partway, bringing news of events you missed, a good harvest in the southern provinces, minor disputes over fishing rights along the Niger, a new poet rising to fame in Timbuktu. There's comfort in the normality of it all. The empire has continued to hum along in your absence. You pass through the Sahel, where the land transitions from desert to grassland. Here, herders guide longhorn cattle across the plains, their silhouettes striking against the late afternoon sky. Children run beside your caravan for short bursts, waving and shouting greetings before peeling off to return to their chores. One evening, camped near a shallow river, you find yourself alone by the water's edge. The river moves lazily, curling around stones polished smooth by years of flow. You remember the Nile, the Red Sea's edge, the fountains in Mecca's courtyards, and now, this humble stream. It strikes you that water has been your constant companion across the world, shaping cities and guiding trade, just as it shapes the banks here in your homeland. A small, quirky moment occurs when one of your guards insists he recognizes a rock formation from a childhood story. He's convinced it's the place where, according to legend, a clever fox once tricked a lion into thinking his reflection was another lion. You humor him and listen to the tale, even though you know foxes aren't quite so common here. The closer you get to the heart of Mali, the more your thoughts shift to what comes next. You have treasures to present, not just in gold but in ideas, visions for libraries, for scholars to be brought in from across the Islamic world, for Timbuktu to become a beacon not just of trade but of learning. At night, the familiar constellations seem brighter. The ground feels more solid beneath you, the air warmer, the wind softer. You know you're not just nearing your physical home, you're nearing the moment when the journey becomes a story told by others. And you hope, quietly, that they will tell it well. The palace feels different after so long away. You walk its shaded corridors, the scent of sun-warmed clay mingling with the faint perfume of flowering plants in the courtyard. The air here carries a stillness that the road never allowed, a stillness that makes your own footsteps sound strangely loud. You settle back into your seat of power, though it takes some adjusting. Months of travel trained you to wake with the sun and sleep with the stars overhead. Now, the days are filled with council meetings, petitions from governors, and the rhythmic recitations of court scribes reading reports aloud. The cushions feel too soft at first, the meals too heavy, but slowly you ease back into the cadence of rule. One mainstream historical fact your people repeat often is that your reign is marked not only by wealth, but by stability, rare for an empire of such size. The borders remain secure, trade continues to flourish, and the gold mines near the Niger still yield their steady treasure. Yet, in quieter moments, you notice how the road has changed you. You speak more often of distant places, of markets in Cairo where the scent of cardamom clings to the air, of Mecca's courtyards where the stone stays cool even under a burning sun. Your advisors listen with a mix of admiration and slight impatience. They want the Mali they know, not always the Mali compared to somewhere else. A quirky habit you've picked up is serving guests dates alongside the usual millet cakes at court banquets. This small addition becomes a novelty, with children in the palace sneaking extra dates from trays when they think no one is looking. Historians still argue whether you formally shifted your political approach after the pilgrimage. Some suggest you became more deliberate in statecraft, leaning heavily into the patronage of scholars and architects. Others think you simply resumed your former style, but with a new layer of confidence born from having been recognized far beyond your own borders. The later years bring subtler projects. You commission gardens where imported plants mingle with native species, orange trees next to baobabs, pomegranate shrubs near shade trees. Walking these paths, you feel time slow in a different way than it did in the desert. Here, life grows in layers, roots deepening, branches widening, flowers unfolding quietly under the sun. At night, you sometimes sit on a low wall near the palace gates, listening to the distant hum of the city. The sound is comforting, vendors packing up stalls, guards calling to each other, the low murmur of travelers arriving late. This is the heartbeat of your empire, steady and sure. And as the years gather, you begin to sense that the great caravan to Mecca will not be your only legacy. The knowledge, the ideas, the new ways of thinking you brought back may, in the long run, weigh as heavily as the gold you gave away. Time has a way of turning events into stories, and stories into something softer, almost dreamlike. You begin to overhear your own pilgrimage spoken of in ways that make you tilt your head, half-true details wrapped in the embroidery of pride. Children chant songs about the ruler who turned the sand to gold, their voices bouncing down market streets. Traders claim they saw you hand a bag of gold to every stranger you met, which you know is impossible but, admittedly, makes for a better tale. In Timbuktu, scholars debate not the fact of your journey, but the meaning of it. Some say it was a spiritual calling above all else, proof of your devotion. Others focus on its economic consequences, how Mali's name became fixed in the minds of distant rulers and merchants. Historians still argue whether your generosity in Cairo truly destabilized the city's economy for years, or whether that claim grew in the telling like a fish story from an old fisherman. Your reign becomes as much an idea as it is a lived memory. Envoys from faraway lands bring gifts, hoping to curry favor with the fabled emperor. Poets weave your name into verses alongside kings of old. A merchant from the eastern coast swears that even sailors in Indian Ocean ports speak of Mali, and of you, in tones of respectful curiosity. One small, quirky outcome of all this storytelling is that gold dust becomes a favorite motif in art during your later years. Craftsmen sprinkle flecks into paint for ceremonial shields, while potters press tiny gilded symbols into clay jars. Whether this is to honor you or simply to make their wares more marketable, you choose not to ask. You walk through markets and hear traders reciting tales to passing customers, describing lands you've never even visited as part of your empire. You're amused by their confidence, how certain they sound in things you know to be untrue. But you let them talk. Sometimes, a ruler benefits as much from myth as from fact. Even the pilgrimage route itself becomes part of the collective imagination. Young men boast that they will someday retrace your steps, older ones shake their heads, claiming only a ruler with divine favor could survive such a journey. You realize that control over a realm extends beyond borders and armies. It lives in the way people speak your name, the way they imagine your deeds. And as those tales drift farther from the strict truth, they grow warmer, softer, like the glow of a sunset over the Niger, something you can't hold in your hands, but that endures in memory. The seasons pass gently now. You rise later in the mornings, the palace windows already bright with sun by the time you step onto the cool tiles. Servants move quietly, carrying pitchers of water or trays of breakfast, millet porridge, fresh fruit, and sometimes those dates you grew so fond of after your travels. You spend more time in the palace gardens than in the council chamber, though you still attend to matters of state when needed. Mali remains prosperous. The markets bustle, the caravans arrive on schedule, and the Niger continues its slow, unhurried curve past the capital. One mainstream historical fact about these later years is that they are remembered as a time of peace. There are no great wars, no sudden upheavals, just the steady hum of a stable empire. For a ruler, it is perhaps the most precious gift, the ability to watch life continue without your constant intervention. You take to meeting foreign visitors in shaded courtyards rather than the throne room. The air is cooler there, and you can hear the birds. Some of these guests bring news of far-off lands where your name is still spoken with wonder. A sailor from across the Red Sea insists that in his home port, children play a game where they pretend to be the king who gives gold. A quirky detail of your later life is your fondness for storytelling at dusk. You invite small groups, courtiers, visitors, or sometimes just curious servants, to sit and listen as you describe the desert, the cities, the people you met. You never tell the story quite the same way twice. Some nights you speak of the wind in the dunes, other nights of the scent of jasmine in Mecca's courtyards. Perhaps, you think, it is not so different from the way your own legend has shifted over the years. Historians still argue whether you abdicated in your final years or simply allowed your successor to take on more duties gradually. The truth, like so much else in memory, has grown hazy. What you do remember clearly is the feeling of sitting under the shade of a baobab, the air warm and still, the sound of the empire carrying on all around you. Your final days are quiet. You rest more often, sometimes drifting to sleep while the sound of the city rises and falls beyond the palace walls. The gold, the journeys, the debates, all of it seems distant now, softened like a dream you half remember. And here, as the sun slips low, we slow down together. Your breathing evens out. The story has come full circle. Wind down, 300 words. Now, let's slow everything even more. You're lying back, eyes half closed, listening to the steady rhythm of a place that has carried on for centuries. The sounds are softer now, market chatter fading into the distance, footsteps muffled by evening air. The sky above Mali turns from bright gold to a muted rose, the kind that seems to stretch time itself. Your hands rest loosely in your lap, no crown weighing them down, no map to study, no audience to impress. The breeze is warm, but not heavy, carrying just a faint scent of river water and blooming flowers from the gardens. Somewhere in the palace, a door closes gently. Farther off, a lute plays in the cool shadows of a courtyard. The notes drift upward, light as dust motes in a sunbeam. You're safe here. The walls are strong, the city is peaceful, and the empire hums along without your constant attention. It is a rare gift for a ruler, and tonight, it is a gift for you, too, the chance to simply be, without moving forward or looking back. Even the air seems to slow, each breath carrying you deeper into stillness. You let your thoughts wander like a caravan on an empty road, knowing there's no hurry to reach the end. And as you close your eyes completely, the sound of that lute, the scent of the flowers, and the warm dusk air fold around you like a blanket. The story rests here. And so do you,